ever so slightly askew?
Do you have, to paraphrase Morpheus, a splinter in your mind?
If you're interested in hearing the latest information about UFOs, the paranormal,
Ancient cultures and structures,
monatomic elements,
longevity,
fantastic discoveries in science,
downloaded to your brain,
then tune into us. Hi, I'm Dave.
and I'm Mackie.
And we are Shiny Side Out, Sundays 2 to 4 a.m. Eastern. See you then.
Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. You don't need to expect us. We're already here. The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Welcome, everyone, to I Am Nature, the show where we look for solutions to all the eco problems on the planet. I'm your host, Brian Porter. I have two very special guests with us this evening. One of them is James McCanney, Tier 1 scientist. How you doing, James?
I'm here. I'm doing very well. How's my sound?
You sound great. You sound great. We were all chatting before the start of the show here, and my producer is having some difficulties reaching through to Alberto Ruz, my other guest. For those of you who listen to my show would know Alberto is an amazing activist who's spent 40 plus years now spreading the word of sustainability all over the planet. He's a main member of the Global Eco Village Network, and one of my favorite guys out there, but we're having a bit of a problem connecting with them, and hopefully we'll get that resolved very soon. Yeah. Hey, Ron, are you there? My producer, Ron, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay.
Excuse me.
I sent him the link.
Yeah, I'm just waiting for him to hook up on the other end.
Okay. All right. Well,
he should pop in here soon.
Okay.
And when he does, I'll drag him in.
Perfect.
So you guys can just continue on. You have one of your guests, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
He's here right now.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, let's start Brian, and then
As soon as I see Alberto here, I'll get him in.
Okay.
All right.
All right, Ron. Thanks a lot.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, Angela Black couldn't make it today. She's had a myriad of problems with her internet and her cell phone. So Ron has been very kind to step in and help us out here today. So thanks a lot, Ron. I really appreciate it. And yeah, James. So you've been traveling a bit.
well, yeah, and it's funny because I had a very new service installed for internet and everything, and at 1:00 this afternoon it went down, so I had to do some more traveling to get to a site where I could at least get a connection to do this show tonight. So Angela's down on all fronts. You said her two internet sites, her connections, and her phone went down. Alberto's phone blew up yesterday, and so it almost seems like somebody's working against us having this interview. But here I am.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad that you made the effort to get to a place where we can connect. This is awesome.
Yeah. No, I didn't want to miss this interview. Some interviews, I'd say, well, gee, I'm on the other side of a mountain and I can't quite get there. But this one, I literally crossed a mountain to get to back to where my good service was, which went out at 1 this afternoon. So I had to do some more traveling here. But anyway, I think we've got some great topics to talk about here. We're going to talk about some archaeology, Mayan calendars, global eco villages, and you were mentioning the Gaia Foundation, and then the wing generator, some things that are all related.
Yeah, I mean, you've I called my show on the internet when I promoted it. I said Pachamama meets a Tesla because it's you're the. I think you're one of the top scientists in the world that's an honest scientist who isn't working for the dark side, who hasn't been seduced by the big money of the military-industrial complex and all the other complexes, be they the pharmaceutical complex or the medical complex, or we know they're all out there. The food, the GMO complex, I mean, they're all out there. And I'm really impressed with your integrity and the fact that you've hung in there and you've managed to, how have you managed to stay independent, James? Scientist.
Well, I just refuse to deal with these groups. And through the decades, I've paid my way to scientific meetings and et cetera, who are on, basically, I call them scientific vacations. These people would be in, Fort Lauderdale AGU meeting on one weekend, and then the next weekend they're in Taiwan. The next week they're in Scandinavia at a meeting. And they're flying all over the world being these big, important scientists, et cetera. The only problem is they are locked into a system where they really don't have freedom. They don't have academic freedom. On July 23rd, my own radio show, I did a special on this entire topic. And when the control of these scientists came in, it was actually in 1991. We might touch on that a little bit. But I've gone to meetings. I have my own science work.
Hey,
I
just
have
a
my
sec.
own.
I've got him coming here. Can I add him? Can we try adding him?
Hey, Brian?
Did we lose Brian?
Well, if he answered the call, probably.
Alberto, is Alberto there? I hear you, Ron.
Yeah, but I don't know what happened to the other guys.
Brian, you back? Okay, now we have everybody, I think.
Is everybody in?
Yes. James? I'm still here. Ryan, are you there?
He must have answered the call. I'm going to have to undo all of this and start over again.
Okay, go for it.
All right, we're going to have to shut it all down. Okay?
Yeah.
Am I looking for
Alberto and James.
James, okay.
James
There's James.
McCanney.
Let me get James there. Okay, you guys are back on air, but I don't have a contact for Alberto here. Like, I've sent him 2 contact requests and he hasn't answered.
Yeah, he's stuck in the conversation that we're having before the call. This is the problem.
I was also.
How's he stuck in that?
He's typing again. I'm telling him to go to your name. Get out of this conversation.
Yeah, touch on the box, the lower right-hand side on my phone anyway. And yeah, he's got to drop that call.
Ron, what's your Skype name again? Ron.Stevens?
Yeah, 7. But I've sent him the request twice. Like, all he's got to do is accept that request, and then he's in here, and I can drag him into your show. Otherwise, I can't get a hold of him.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay, I just sent him. For some reason, he says he can't connect with you. So it's Ron.Stevens7.
Yeah.
Let's see if he'll plug that in directly.
That's with a PH, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
STEPHENS. 7.
Here, I got him. He's here. We got him. Got him, but why can't I add him?
Because the CIA doesn't want us to.
What the freak's going on here?
Are you still there, James?
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, way to go.
Wait a minute. Okay, add to group call. Okay, we got him calling. Okay. We should have him now, yeah?
Okay.
Hey, Alberto.
Hello.
Hey, we're all together now. Awesome.
Everybody's in?
Okay.
Everybody's in.
All right, I'm going to have some supper.
Okay, Ron.
All right, have fun, guys.
Okay. So, Alberto.
Yes.
We were just chatting a bit about James's career in science and how he had to basically say buy to the complex of science because he didn't agree with their approach and that he had other ideas. But what I wanted to do, though, is start with the both of you and get back to your roots, one of them being archaeology. Can you explain to James your background and your father's interest and discoveries in archaeology in Mexico?
Sure. Well, so I'll talk to James and to whoever is listening to James and me in this moment and to you. I was born in Mexico and I grew up in Yucatan. I grew up in the city of Mérida because my father was the first Mexican to be Mexican, even if he was French and Cuban, but he became Mexican, and then he was the first student of archaeology in this country and the first graduated in the Instituto Nacional de Antropología y Historia. His first generation of first archaeologists to have graduated here in Mexico in the 1940s, maybe 43, 44.
What was his name, Alberto?
But his name was the same than me, Alberto, Rus, and his second name is French, it's Louis Lier, because my grandmother was French and my grandfather was Cuban. So,
James, do you know this guy? Do you ever heard of this guy's name? Alberto's dad?
No, but I when I was in Mexico in 1971, I went to many archaeological digs with Dr. Carmen, and I'm trying to think of her last name. Her husband was one of the top archaeologists in Mexico, and he died, and she took over his work. And
what's her name?
Carmen is her first name, and I'm trying to think of her last name.
Okay.
She did a lot of. She was the head archaeologist on many sites. I was at one outside of Mexico City down by Cuernavaca where they had just discovered a major temple and camped there as they were digging up the ruins.
Uh-huh. Carmen, yeah, I know who she. You're talking about Carmen Cook. Carmen Cook.
I'm sorry, Carmen what?
Cook.
Okay.
Yeah?
Spell that.
Carmen Cook. Carmen Cook, that is right. That is absolutely right. And so I was at many sites with her, and it was really through a friend that I met her, and we went out and literally slept in hammocks at the site. And very interesting, the one site was discovered because the corn wouldn't grow on the top of this hill, so the guy started clearing off the dirt and discovered a temple. But anyway, continue, Alberto. Continue.
My place, my community, my eco village is about 5 kilometers away from that place.
Oh, interesting. I knew this was going to become a small world quick.
Yeah. You were with Carmen. You were in a place called Amatlan, and Amatlan is.
Oh, okay, Amatlan. Yes.
And this is one of the second nearest village to our community, and that's one of the places where we go very often to make ceremonies and festivals. We did a corn festival just a couple of months ago over there.
Oh yeah. Well, when I was there, you could only see the top of the pyramid.
Yeah.
That's how much was being dug at the time. But
yeah. Okay.
Interesting.
Carmen Cook was a friend, more or less a friend of my father, and you know, Carmen Cook was a little like you. She was not a very orthodox archaeologist, you know, and she had the same problem you had with institutions, that she was not very well accepted in the world of archaeology either, you know. Anyway, but my father mostly worked in Yucatan, in Chiapas, and in Campeche. That's in the southeast, and that's mostly. All his life he worked with the Mayan culture, not with the cultures from here, from the center, you know. So that's what I grew up.
Aztec, yes.
El sureste, sí. And which, do you remember any of the places in that part of Mexico where you could have been in archaeological sites?
Oh, yeah.
Name me a couple.
It's Tulum, all of them around it. I spent a lot of time in Mérida. Many times we would fly into Mérida to begin our travels.
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, Uxmal, Chichen Itza,
Okay.
Tulum, and various other sites. I was just a number of years ago at a site. They were just digging it up outside of Cancun,
Right.
west of Cancun a ways. There was a new site, and I went there with a couple other people, and there was nobody there. So I thought, well, I'll just walk in, even though there was a sign there. I didn't see anybody. Within 5 minutes, there was a truck full of armed people there, Mexicans.
Mm-hmm.
And the guy got out and he said, get out of here. You're not supposed to be here. And I said, okay, see you later. But they were very intent on keeping people out of there, which was good.
I think the place you are talking about is Coba, which is, as you say, very near from Playa del Carmen and after Cancun. Yeah. But by the way, were you ever in Chiapas?
Oh yes. Oh yes.
Do you remember?
Yeah, I traveled all over Mexico. In fact, I was in Yucatan, Oaxaca, literally all over Mexico. I was down by Acapulco probably 10 times. I every weekend, what I did is I taught at the high school, basically the rich kids of Mexico, and I lived amongst the poorest people. And in the weekend, I had a big van. I had a Ford Econoline van, and I got in that thing, and we everywhere.
Well, I was asking you about Chiapas because there is a site there that is very well known all over the world now. That the name is Palenque.
Oh, Palenque, absolutely. Yeah, we used to
Yes.
camp there.
Well, Palenque, there is a temple which is called the Temple of Inscriptions. Right in the plaza from Palenque, there is a gigantic temple called the Temple of Inscriptions, and it got that name because in the temple up in the top of the pyramid, there is the largest inscription codex that in stone that had been found until then, and that's why the name of Templo de las Inscripciones came too. And my father worked there in the late 40s and early 50s and digging inside of that temple, of that pyramid. And in 1952, he discovered the royal tomb of King Pakal, which became the most important archaeological discovery in Mexico. I think until now, they have never found something similar like that in Mexico. So that's how my father became a very well-known archaeologist all over the world, because never in Mexico had they ever before found a temple and a pyramid to be used for funerary purposes, and never of the magnificence of this discovery, because this king was totally covered by jewels, and on top of him there was this lapida tapstone, which was engraved with the figure of a character or a personage, which Eric von Daniken called the astronaut. So well, that's where the whole thing came about, is that the discovery was a scientific archaeological discovery, but then Eric von Daniken said that there was a spaceship, and that the person who was buried there, King Pakal, was an astronaut. And then many people in the world got to know the book of Daniken saying, and they call it the astronaut,
Yes. Now, is that the tomb with the jade?
Exactly. Mm-hmm. The jade mask.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, I was there. When we were there in 1971, it was still very open. We camped right there. The pools, the cascade, the water pools there.
Yeah, el baño de la reina.
There. Yeah, we camped there, and nobody was there. I mean, it was just us, two people, and we camped there, and it was wide open. We would walk around the grounds, in the middle of the night, looking at the stars and climbing the top of the pyramids. And of course, the big savanna around Palenque is beautiful at night with all the stars out. And it was very nice. Now everything is very controlled.
Totally controlled. Thousands of tourists, gates everywhere, and you cannot climb in any of the temples. Remember, there is a tower over there in Palenque, which it was the observatory.
Yes.
Well, that tower was rebuilt also by my father. He rebuilt most of the center of Palenque. Yeah. So that's where I grew up. That's my background.
Wow.
That's what Brian was asking before. I mean, I was not camping. I was living there. I spent almost. I lived sometimes 1 month, 2 months with my dad in Palenque, and then in Chichen and Uxmal and Sayil and Caba and Tulum before there was roads to any of those places. So I was half monkey and half Mowgli.
The jungle there as a young man growing up, that was just amazing. When we were at Tulum, they had just built the first road down there, which is now still there. It's next to the main highway now, but it was made out of shells. They dug these big caverns, and it was all seashells down to about 50 feet. And that's what they used to pave the road. And we were the first people to go down the road when they opened it, and opening up Tulum. And it was very interesting. And we walked back in the jungle there, and the Lacandon Indians were still there in their little villages, etc. And I want to recount an experience I had there. I was in a little like tienda type of thing where this woman basically sold bananas and traded with the people that came in. And this woman was probably 3.5 feet tall, and I'm like, 6 feet tall. And she was, like a little bird. And so she didn't speak Spanish, and I didn't speak Lacandon. So we're like, couldn't communicate. So I was kind of pointing, and of her head on a perch was a quetzal bird. And I was watching the bird, and it was right at sundown. That bird spread its wings and flew directly over my head. Now, Brian, a quetzal bird is a bird of paradise with a long plumed tail. And when the bird opened up its wings, the coloration on the bottom looked like a giant comet, and with the long tail. And only 20 years later, when I was at Cornell University doing some studying there, it was probably about 10 years later, I'd say, did I realize that the term quetzal bird was named after Quetzalcoatl, the plumed serpent god of the night sky, who is central to the Mayan cultures. And in my work and interpretation, Quetzalcoatl, one of the personages of Quetzalcoatl was a comet. And that comet, eventually, his heart became the planet Venus. And so that was part of Mayan mythology. But just recounting that from my time in Tulum, back in the jungle with the Lacandon Indians. And it was one of those things that, how many times would the quetzal bird roosting during the day and flying at night fly right over your head like that? But, I think somebody was directing me all the time.
Yeah. Well, when you see the tomb of Pacal, this tapstone that is covering his tomb, he's got the character who's lying down, and there is a cross, some sort of a cross coming out from his heart, and it's called the Árbol de la Vida, or the Tree of Life, and it represents probably the corn, and represents probably the cycles of life. And on top of this cross, in the superior part of the cross, there is a quetzal. And in the two arms of the cross, there is the snake, the coat. The coat is the serpent, and quetzal is the bird. So, and so basically, you can find the Quetzalcoatl or Kukulkan or Gugumats, which is the different names he got in different places, but it always representing the serpent and the bird, united, and the vision of earth and the vision of the bird. I mean, the vision, the higher vision from the flying, and then the serpent going with her body directly on the earth.
Right. That's sometime we'll have to talk a lot about this particular topic. I know Brian had mentioned we're going to talk about calendars a bit, but this leads right into that entire topic.
Yeah, I mean, the reason James was James, you were down there to try to confirm a theory you had on this comet that became Venus. Maybe you could start talking about that. Although we're going to have a break probably soon, maybe we should say that for after the break.
Okay. Now, which study were you talking about? This is one I did recently, or
no? Your theory in the formation of the solar system, the Venus, the comet, all that stuff.
Oh yes. Okay.
Which is why you.
Yeah. Let's wait.
My understanding is you did a lot of archaeology to try to confirm your theory on the way the planet had shifted.
Yes. In fact, Alberto, I did quite a bit of surveying at Chichen Itza, Uxmal, Tulum, and I brought my surveying equipment down there, and I was out in the jungles outside of there. I will continue after the break.
Yeah, we're going to go on a break, folks. So we'll be back in a few continue our interesting discussion with Alberto Ruz and James McCanney. Welcome back to I Am Nature. I'm your host, Brian Porter. I have two guests on with me this week, Alberto Ruz and James McCanney. Now, my show, I didn't get a chance to introduce it properly because we had some issues connecting with Alberto, but the show name this week is Pachamama Meet Tesla. Alberto is the Pachamama and James is the Tesla. It's quite a remarkable meeting of the minds here, folks. And we were just getting to the sort of the impetus that led James to develop such a keen interest in archaeology. Maybe you can pick it up there, James.
Oh yeah, and first of all, I just find this amazing. I'm sitting here, actually in a foreign country right now, but talking to Alberto,
foreign continent.
Talking and listening to Alberto talk about his youth and growing up in these places where I visited. Actually, after his father had developed these, he knows Carmen Cook, who I knew there when I was on archaeological. She was the archaeologist on staff at these digs. So to hear this, and we're meeting here for the first time, this for me is just amazing. I'm just thrilled at this ability to talk to Alberto here, especially and have everybody else listening to this conversation. Anyway, you asked about the in Mexico, and now just some issues. The Mexican standard archaeology talks about Quetzalcoatl as a kind of a tall European guy. And by the way, there's a guy where I'm trying to do research on. Alberto and I will have to talk about this. His name is Chacmul, and he appears in many of the Mayan sites and out in the middle of the jungle. He's like a 6 foot tall Scandinavian looking guy with moccasins. And he's in the middle of like Chichen Itza with this little cup on his stomach looking to the west. But anyway, it turns out that the Chichen Itza, which is dedicated to the sun, is 13.5 degrees off of the principal coordinates. Now, don't you think that the Mayans, knowing calendars, knowing archaeology or the history and everything else, would have built their city on the true coordinates of northeast, south, and west? And it's also, if you go to Uxmal, if you go to Tulum, none of them lie on the true north, south, east, and west coordinates. And every spring, in fact, they
let me just ask Alberto if he knows this. Alberto, are you aware of this?
Yeah, I'm. That the discovery, I mean, the rediscovery, the understanding of that orientation was basically found around the 70s when on the equinoxes the people started to observe for the first time, because before, probably some people knew it before, but it was unknown for the public that there was this alignment of the sun with the temple of Quetzalcoatl or Kukulkan, and at that moment the serpent of light will descend from the top of the pyramid to the head of the serpent, which is in the bottom of the pyramid. Well, that discovery basically made many new archaeologists, Astro Archeologists, to start observing and measuring precisely the orientations, the number of steps, and the number of, basically everything that had to do with the architecture of the sacred sites, of what we call now archaeological sites. And they started to see that each one of the temples and each one of the different centers, archaeological centers, ceremonial centers, had different orientations, like Teotihuacan has one, Xochicalco has one, Chaltún has another one, Palenque has another one, and all of those orientations and the measures and the distance and all of that correspond, and obviously, to observations of the sky, now there is this whole area from archaeology who deals with astronomy, archaeoastronomy, which has been developing only in the last 15, 20 years. Some of the disciples of my father are some of the first younger, at that time, archaeologists who started to do those observations and to to let them know to the rest of the public.
Okay, James. So complete I interrupted you there, but I just wanted to make sure Alberto was aware of this stuff. Okay, keep going. James?
From Alberto and that. Can you hear me?
Yeah, got you now.
Okay, good. Here's what I discovered, and this is something that I've been working. The Mayans we deal with today, or what we call the Mayans, lived probably between 800 AD and 1000 AD. That's when their peak civilization was, somewhere in that time frame. But they were based on roots that go way back to the Olmecs, which are probably 1500 BC or before. So the mathematics of the Mayans, a lot of the symbols, the Quetzalcoatl, the terminology, and not only in that area of the world, but the Incas also had previous civilizations that they grew out of. But at around 1500 BC, or somewhere back then, there was a Quetzalcoatl, the terminology.
James, repeat that. We lost you for about 5 seconds.
We lost you for about 3 sentences.
Yeah.
Oh, really? Okay, so in around 1500 BC, the Olmecs, which were the civilization that came long predecessor of the Mayans, they existed around 1500 BC. And the mathematics, the language, the scripts, the calendars, everything that we see in the modern Mayan was brought down and carried over from literally thousands of years earlier. And so what my conclusion was that the cities of Chichen Itza and all the other ones, if you take and align their north-south, if you take the grid work that they're built on, and then let them cross Ontario, north of the state of Michigan. And so that was the old
North Pole.
North Pole.
For a few seconds, James. Go back to the North Pole, the original North Pole. Yeah.
Yeah, the North Pole before the Venus encounter was in the province of Ontario, just north of the United States state of Michigan. And all of these north, south, east, west gridworks point to that point. And so what my conclusion was is the pole shift that occurred when Venus, the comet, came by, which the ancients called Quetzalcoatl, it wrenched the earth, the old Laurentian ice cap with North America at the time, melted washing out the Mississippi River, the Oregon, as far west as Oregon. And in that time, the Siberia was a temperate climate. So this entire world shifted. Antarctica at the time was a continent free of ice. It was not where the South Pole is. And one of my books explains how this shift works. It's like the core keeps spinning. It's a physics problem, basically. But the point was that the Mayans were extremely concerned about Venus, and was based on the cycles of Venus, and it took them a long time to stabilize that calendar back in history. But when they rebuilt the modern cities, they rebuilt them on the old gridwork, the old north, south, east, west gridwork. And so that was my conclusion. And that's also pointing to the fact that back in the early, built them on a gridwork of true north, south, east, and west. But the many calendars of the Mayans, they had business calendars, they had social calendars, but the central religious calendar was based on the cycles of Venus. And now, why on earth would anybody base a culture on Venus? And this is not just the Mayans, it's the Incas, it's the Chinese, the Tibetans. Zimbabwe has a calendar dedicated to Venus. And so anyway, what was going on is as Venus worked its way through the solar system and worked its way into its current orbit, the Mayans had many celebrations, and still it's like a Passover type of celebration where they are worried that Venus is going to come back and destroy the world. And it's literally a Passover type of celebration where they go into their huts, paint blood over the doors and basically seal the doors. And the reason they did that is because when the comet passed by, originally a lot of people died, and the people that knew enough to seal themselves in their huts lived through this. Now this is the same as the Passover, the Hebrew Passover. And back then those people understood the danger of comets, something that has been totally whitewashed in modern life. Comet model. And so my work to show that comets are not dirty snowballs, that they're a plasma discharge of the solar capacitor, and that very large comets, which we rarely see, can become planets, and Venus is a prime example. And so at any rate, that's, that gets into the Mayan calendars, the working, and why did they choose Venus as the center point of their calendar? Because at one time, Venus was a large comet that was moving through the solar system. And this goes totally against the grain of modern science, of modern astronomy, etc. And what I've shown in my scientific work is the plasma discharge comet model shows how comets work. They are a discharge of an electrical capacitor that the sun builds up in outer space. And then my further work on weather prediction, etc., all kinds of other predictions that I've made based on this theoretical work have come true. And so in terms of predicting weather based on planetary electrical alignments, etc. But back in the early days, like the 1500 BC and earlier, Earth had some very earth-shattering experiences, and there was large populations before that. And that's when the Olmecs, basically all of those civilizations which were very populous. We know in Peru, for example, now, that they've just unearthed some archaeological digs along the west coast of Peru that had, they estimate, 40 million people living there, and there's nothing left. There's no trace of sherds, potsherds, there's no trace of anything. There's no bones, there's nothing, and it was all washed clean by these big tidal waves that came back in history. In fact, they found seashells up on the mountainsides, way up in the mountains. So they know this vast tidal wave came in and literally washed that area clean.
Wow. Wow. So Alberto, what do you think of James's view on this past event, Venus and all that stuff?
Well, I was listening, and I I read 3 or 4 of his of your books, James, in the last week, and I
Yes.
read a little about the background from all your investigation and all your conclusions. Um, the Mayans, there is some of the tablets that were found a few years ago from the Mayans. They date from not 1500 but 3000 years before Christ. In fact, this
Yes.
book about the year 2012 was basically the end of a cycle of 5,228, I don't know how many days, or years, which was basically one of the turns of the cycle of one of the calendars of the Mayans. Like you said before, the Mayans had many different calendars, between 18 and 20 known calendars, and each one of those calendars represented cycles of larger and larger and larger cycles of time, and the Olmecs probably exist. They were active because if the Mayans were already creating cities and ceremonial centers back in 3,000 years before Christ, so that's we're talking about 5,000 years ago, and the Olmecs were previous to them. That means that the Olmecs, and who were some the earliest civilizations in this part of the America, were before that. So, in fact, maybe the dates are because if this Venus comet who provoked these big changes on the Earth and everything was in the 1500, well, we're talking that we're now finding proof that the Mayans were there many years even before that. Then Venus,
Yes.
as you presented, is basically would be a memory would have lasted in the memories of the people and from generations as a bad sign, because if the Venus would come and bring bad news, because it would bring all those changes, Venus would be a fearful force in the universe that would have left a trace on the memory of for many generations. And I have not found, at least in Mexico, that the people is afraid of Venus. In all the contrary, Venus is always, when it's represented as Quetzalcoatl, and they are talking about the return of Quetzalcoatl, not as a dramatic thing, but as a change of time and as a change of cycles of time and of returns of cycles of history of humanity. So, there is some different idea for me that of the way. I mean, Venus, when Venus appears in the horizon, which is the first star that appears in the horizon, is always marking the beginning of something. It's the first star, the most brightest star. And many of the temples are dedicated to Venus. So if it was meant that it was kept in the memory of people as a catastrophe, I don't think they will be feared. I mean, they will be received or will be kept as a moment in history that will be, like what you present in your hypothesis, is that was an ending. That's what I get from what you just said and from what I read.
There's two parts of it, Alberto. The first part was the fear that something would happen, but then afterwards, when it does not happen, then there's the rejoice or the rejuvenation, and that's what prompted the Mayans to rebuild another layer on their temples.
Yeah.
And they would cycle this every 54 years, and that was the spacing between the two events. Venus had two events on Earth, and the second one was apparently much worse. But that would spur them to build another layer on the temple cities.
Yeah.
But you're correct in what they were doing was they were saying, no, this was a regeneration of life. It was a renewal of life. It was a positive thing, and it was something to look forward to. But also recounting the fact, the other thing that you have to remember about Quetzalcoatl and the Mayans in general is it's not like we have, say, George Washington, a president of the United States. He was one guy, he had a certain history, But Quetzalcoatl was also a person that brought them corn. Quetzalcoatl was a central figure in their manner of living, that brought them the proper way to live. And so the personification, and that was something that confused me for a long time. And really, they had a way of looking at things in multiples. And so Quetzalcoatl was this guy who was a white-skinned Scandinavian type of guy who brought corn to them and also taught them how to live. Yet Quetzalcoatl represented Venus, the plumed serpent god of the night sky, whose heart eventually became the planet Venus. So you have these many personifications of Quetzalcoatl,
you just brought up something that is interesting. You know, two things basically. One of them is that he was, besides this figure who is in the sky, or who is in the universe, planet or comet or star, whatever, and then on the other side you have this character who represented this person who came at a certain time in the history of this continent, bringing civilization, the good aspects of civilization, agriculture, astronomy, archaeology, sculpture. I mean, it was the bearer of a civilization of peace, of culture, And I think if that happened much before the time of the Mayans, so I don't know, we don't know exactly when this first Quetzalcoatl might have come, but afterwards in Kukulkan, or Quetzalcoatl, or Gugumats, or whatever the name he got, became part of their religion, of their spirituality, So the ¿cómo se llama? The Quetzalcoatl became something like a rank in their hierarchy of their religion, and it was not one Quetzalcoatl. There were many Quetzalcoatls. In fact, Carmen Cook in Amatlan, one of the things she discovered, and maybe at the time you were there or maybe afterwards, she discovered that the last of the well-known Quetzalcoatl in the history of Mexico was born in Amatlan. In fact, Amatlan has changed name, and we helped the people in the village to change the name from Amatlan to Amatlan de Quetzalcoatl. And right now, in the plaza of the center of the plaza, there is a Quetzalcoatl statue, which was made maybe 20 years ago. And now people come every year, several times a year, to make ceremonies in front of that statue of Quetzalcoatl. And I just did one a couple of months ago, exactly in that place. So Quetzalcoatl, this last Quetzalcoatl, the name was Seacatl Topiltzin Quetzalcoatl, was maybe the ninth of those of the Quetzalcoatl that existed in this lineage, in this chronology of different Quetzalcoatl before him as spiritual political leaders of this nation, And I think in some way it represented a little what the Dalai Lama is. He was a spiritual teacher, but at the same time he was a ruler. So when the story of the return of Quetzalcoatl corresponds to this, we continue later.
Beto, we're coming up on a break here, so if you can go into chat box, that would be great. We'll be back soon with I'm Nature with my two great guests, Alberto Ruz and James McCanney. Welcome back to I'm Nature. I'm your host, Brian Porter. I have two very smart people with me today, James McCanney and Alberto Ruz, contrasting the history of the Mayan culture and some even older cultures in Mexico, looking at different theories of what happened. And but before we get back in that discussion, I have to put in my plug-in for Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com on your computer. This is the largest listener-supported network on the internet, on the globe, and we really need your support. I find this show here is a definite show you might want to download off the archive, which is $5 a month to get access to 80 different shows on the network. This show alone is worth $5, folks. We have 2 top experts in Mexican archaeology contrasting their views on what actually happened way back 5,000, 10,000, who knows how many years ago. And this is a fascinating discussion, and maybe we'll have a follow-up one to it. But this really is an amazing show, and I hope that you'll make a contribution some way. Like I say, my favorite place to go is the archives, but there are other ways to donate. You can just do a straight-up donation of $5, $10, whatever you can afford. But we do need your support. And now, let's get back to this great discussion. Alberto and James, are we still together?
Yeah.
Yes.
All right.
Alberto, keep talking. You got cut off by the break there. But let me just preface it by saying that when I talk about dates, and my dates, I actually personally never put dates on things.
Yeah, I know you don't.
Because I don't know, but what I believe is this Venus event happened. And what would be wonderful is if we could somehow arrive at this and, the effects on the culture.
Mm-hmm.
Understand that this was a major earth-shattering event in the history of the world, which shaped the future, which is the electrical discharge on the nose side of the comet, on the big comets.
You cut out for a bit there, James. You cut out for a bit.
Oh, okay. I was just mentioning that Quetzalcoatl was the plumed serpent god of the sky that controlled the sky, always imaged as the serpent, and with his big fiery tail and a long tongue. And the long tongue is the electrical discharge on the sunward side of the comet, which is part of my theoretical work, and that's why I'm so interested in Quetzalcoatl. But to try and place this somewhere in history that deals with dates, and so I'm just making kind of statements, but I think it's a topic we really have to pursue to understand where these cultures died off and then came back in history.
Yeah. Well, the image of the lightning and the flying serpent and the feather serpent, or the rainbow serpent, or the Quetzalcoatl, or the Kukulkan, makes sense. I mean, it's an image that represents an archetype with the dragons, which are in all cultures. And there is most cultures talk about those dragons, and those dragons could be also the comets, and could be also these forces or archetypes that stayed in the memory of the humans as a memory from something that, obviously shook the roots of their cultures and their civilizations. And but anyway, like you say, I understand what you said, that you don't talk about dates. And it's difficult to talk about dates because basically our counting, our chronology of time is very small compared to the chronology of the life of Earth and the life of our solar system and blah, blah, blah. So when we basically start talking about calendars, we start talking about a culture or a civilization saying the year 1 is this one and year 2 is this one. And it starts when the walls of Jerusalem fell down, or when Muhammad went to the Mecca, or when this and this, or when the Christ was born. I mean, basically most of the calendars are starting and dates who have to do with human events. So the discovery of the calendars is very, in that sense, with dates, precise dates, is very recent. It's basically when they're based in an anthropological and anthropocentric characters. When I was reading yesterday your book about preparations for the big changes that would come to the next planet X, and you said one of the first things we have to do is to start putting stones, in different places and start marking the directions of the solstice and to recreate new calendars. Imagine, if our history is only like 15 or 20 or 30 or 100,000 years old, our history as anthropoids, and the history of the Earth is millions, and then this history of the system is millions and millions and millions. So when is day one?
Oh yeah, yeah. We have a very well. Let's look at just the birth of, let's say, Christ, or other events that you mentioned. We really don't have a date. There's a lot of study as to it might be this range of dates, and then we pick one to have a celebration.
Right.
But it has nothing to do with the real date. Nobody really knows.
Exactly.
And that's recent history. There was history at that time. There was census. He went to a census. When he was born, there was a census being taken. We don't know what year that census was taken. So let's go back in history where there was a big lapse of time where we really didn't have written history. It's only verbal or through the rocks and the petroglyphs. How do we pick out a date? If you got 10 archaeologists in one room, they'd all have 10 different opinions.
Exactly.
But anyway, it's a topic we could talk for a long time on. But it's the fact it should in the future. But anyway, the one point I want to make is that this big event when Venus came through was earth-shattering, and that's in most of modern knowledge. If you go to a university today, whether you study archaeology or
Oops.
We lost him.
We lost you, James, again.
I'm sorry.
He'll come back. We lost you for
when
2
I
minutes.
was putting Quetzalcoatl as a event in the world is very important. But when I was at Cornell in 1979, the archaeoastronomy department, there was just people there. But that's, like you say, Alberto, it's a very recent that archaeoastronomy has really developed as a subject, as a serious subject at the university level, whereas like your father and Carmen Cook were already grappling with that back in the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s. But it's a very difficult topic to try and understand. Also, I've talked to people who are psychologists to understand the mentality of the Mayans. We kind of know what they did, but I mean, what were these people thinking?
Yeah.
Many unknowns.
Yeah. When you say there is 10, if you put 10 archaeologists talking about any subject, there will be 10 different opinions. It reminds me, for instance, this story about my father when he did this discovery from the king, which some people now, many people call Pacal, in Palenque. Well, at that time, my father didn't even call him anything. He just said he was born probably in this date. So people used to get the names from the date they were born. So he never dared to give him a name. And since then, all the new schools of archaeologists, especially from the U.S., came, and Mexico went to Palenque and started to make these mesas redondas, round tables, and there came 15, 20 archaeologists, specialists in Mayan, and they started to recreate the whole life psychology, ceremonies, lineage, who married who, and they made the whole story of who the Mayans were. The mystery of the Mayans was developed. But it's again, it's the thing. I like to read all of that because basically culture is made from all our fantasies, is made of all our discoveries, is made of all of our paranoias, is made of all our dreams and our visions, and all of it creates it. I mean, it's not one truth or not another truth. I mean, I read one and I read the other one and I think, okay, well, this is what culture is. It's the ensemble or a kaleidoscope in which many pieces of the truth basically try to accommodate with each other to give you a picture of how things could have been in the past. So I think calendars and studying the past has very much with that beauty and with this, craziness of trying to read the history backward.
Yeah, let me give you another example. When I study science, and because a lot of my theoretical work goes against the grain of science, I had to study. I had to be a thorough student of everything that had gone on in history of science to get up to where modern astronomy is today. For example, you can't talk about a subject or try and introduce new concepts if you don't know what everybody is out there talking about or what's published. So, so in this, Alberto, I'm sure, you know, when this Mayan calendar, everybody's going to die in 2012, well, that came about. You had a lot of people who had absolutely no background in anything dealing with Mayans.
Right.
And, you know, that we were all going to die in December 21st, 2012. And that's one thing. I was on many radio shows trying to dispel that, saying that, you know, these are people that don't, you know, how come they let these people write a book or be on radio shows and they have zero background in anything of the Mayans, let alone calendars.
I did the same thing you did. I went to also many conferences and events and radio talks and TV programs saying the same thing. I mean, basically, stirring up the imagination and the paranoia of the people with no knowledge about what's in the back or whatever, what it means and all of that. I mean, basically, well, we're sheep. You know, humanity is now in a stage of a cycle of its history where basically we are just sheep. You know, we repeat and we do bay and everybody does bay.
You've got it. That's one very good example. You know, yeah, we could. In fact, we're going to talk a lot about this topic of calendars and history and timing and all of that.
I wanted to get onto the issue of that. This is something that we discussed in our own interview, Alberto, about the fact that there's a lot of disagreement between different Mayan factions on the calendars and what they which one was the right calendar and which one is the. And so it's created some difference within the culture. It's created walls between the Mayan culture. Is that not true?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I don't know if it happens with the people who study also the Mayan. I mean, the Sumerian calendars or the Egyptian calendars or the Inca calendars or the Chinese calendars or the Hebrew calendars. I don't know if the same controversy that we have among the Mayans, but Mayans became very, suddenly they were on the stage in the last 10, 15, 20 years, you know. So very many people is having different opinions about the Mayan beginning of time and therefore the ending of cycles.
Yeah, that's true. And so that there's been a lot of talk about that. But yeah, there's you know, there's a lot of misunderstanding. But business, they had their social calendar, they had, you know, all of these different calendars for different uses, and it's like that. It's the same thing with Quetzalcoatl. You have to understand that the Mayans accepted multiple personalities, multiple things, multiple calendars.
And all of that.
They found no problem with that at all. It's like today,
Alberto,
if we had...
just a sec, James. Alberto, you dropped off for about 2 minutes.
Oh, shit.
we lost your connection. So try to remember what you were saying before you dropped off.
Yeah, well, I don't know where I dropped off, but anyway.
Well, you were saying about the Mayan, the cycles, the Mayan calendar, something like that.
Okay, well, basically what I was saying is that most of the knowledge that the Earth...
I can't hear you. Oh, we lost him again. Are you there, James?
What happened? I'm here or not? I'm here, I'm not?
Okay, yeah, okay. Most of the knowledge, you said. Most of the knowledge. Okay, you're back.
Yeah, okay. Well, so my father learned from then, and basically he thought that his teachers were right in the way of interpreting the calendars. But then slowly you understood, the way I understood, that the Yucatecos, the Mayas, Yucatecos, were the youngest of all the Mayans. They were the last Mayans by the time the Spaniards came. That's where the Yucatan was very much alive. But Palenque and Chiapas and Bonampak and Yaxchilan have been buried in the forest now for 500 years. And Tulum and Copan and Coba and other places have been buried by 600 or 700 or I don't know how many years before, you know. So from there, from Guatemala, from Salvador, from all the areas, you know, where now we know there is Mayans, the priests started to come up and say, no, the calendars from the Yucatecos were not right. We have kept the count doing ceremonies and rituals every time that the moon or the Pleiades or the stars or the planets align in such a way and such a way. And they say this, you were wrong. The first day is not this day, is this day. And then others from another area from the Mayans came with another calendars. And basically all of these different calendars have different dates of beginning, you know. So when you have a date of beginning that is different from the other one, well, the whole interpretation is different.
Yeah. Well, this is what I like about James's theory, is that he's saying that the Mayan calendar did not adjust to the fact that the world shifted 13 and a half degrees, and this is what's created all the controversy, right? Is that a good summary, James?
Well, and you know, calendars in general, you have to remember our current Julian calendar was solidified by Julius Caesar, and before that they had many calendars. So this is not unusual, because we have modern astronomy. People have been much more exact. But imagine today if we had 2 calendars, or 3, or 4, or 5. And in a sense we do. We have some religious calendars that then we all shift these and coordinate them with the standard calendar. But these tribes, or if you want to call them that, were disjoint in time and in place. So, you know, they were all attempting to deal with their calendar, etc. But the one common element here is that they go back to this Venus event, to Quetzalcoatl, which was central to their mythological calendars, the ones that were the main rituals. Would you agree with that, Alberto, that the Quetzalcoatl was central to the majority of the major holidays?
From a certain moment, yes, but not for always in the Mayans, you know. The Quetzalcoatl cult started in, you know, was very much, we don't know from where it starts, but basically the Aztecs and the Toltecs brought it very much to the Yucatan and to all those areas, you know. Maybe the beginning was the Olmecs. From the Olmecs, he went to the early Mayans. From the early Mayans, he went to the Aztecs and the Toltecs, and then he returned with the figure of Quetzalcoatl very strongly, and as part of their cosmogony, as mythology, you know. So I don't know if always Venus has had such an importance for the different cultures, you know. In a certain moments they do, you know, like in every 52 years they have this reconstruction of the temples and what they call the fuego nuevo, a new fire, you know, in which the old time was buried and a new fire was extinguished and a new fire was started, you know, and a new temple was built on top of the other temple. And when you are 52 and you're like a person, you change from being a person to become an elder too, you know. 52 became a date that is very important, and it has to do with the cycles of Venus also. But I mean, yeah, I don't know enough from all the different cultures to say that this is the same thing for all the other cultures as well. I have not studied them enough to be able to say that, or yes or no.
Yeah, anyway, I'm glad I got your input on that. But yeah, that 52 years, I'm sorry, I said 54 years before when I was commenting, but it's 52 years. And all of these cycles, which is, by the way, 4 times 13.
Yeah.
And there seems to be, well, it's all of these relationships between the basic cycles and everything. But that was my estimate of the importance of that recurring event, because that's when originally the difference between the two events of Venus.
Mm-hmm.
And But also, yeah, going back in history, you have to remember when this pole shift occurred, as a physical pole shift of the Earth, not the magnetic pole. Some people
Right.
talk about the magnetic pole shift. They were talking physically, the gyrations axis of the Earth shifted, but that the day length, the number of days in the year, everything changed.
Right.
And so the calendars all over the world, people had trouble rebuilding the calendar. And then you see the major population centers of today, Tibet, China, India, is where people fared better because they were up in the mountains, they were farther away from the oceans. One of the characteristics of Quetzalcoatl is he carries the ocean on his back. And those are the tremendous tidal waves, that would occur. There's so many of these properties of one of the personas of Quetzalcoatl that it makes it sound like, he's the destroyer, he brings wind, rain, and carries the ocean on its back, etc. And but there again, you have to mix this with all of their other persons and the fact that they have multiple calendars, all of these very difficult things for us to understand.
Well, what I like about James's theory is that it explains the mass burying of these beautiful cities that were, I would assume, quite populated, and they were just all of a sudden they were under like hundreds of feet of dirt. Like, how did that just happen?
But these are the modern Maya. Now remember that the Venus event was thousands of years back in history. So these, what we call them, I call the modern Maya, the like Alberto is saying, Palenque, Tulum were earlier, and the various times when they were populated, the Yucatan Maya being the later. So these cultures came and went, but they all seem to carry the same themes through their cultures, through their main mythology. And we do that today. I mean, if you look at Christianity, Muslims, and Buddha, etc., all of these really came out of the same roots. And we're still celebrating stuff today that happened 2,000 years ago. So this is not out of the ordinary that a population or a culture would do this. This whole era of history. By the way, I just want to make a comment, Alberto. I'll send you a copy of this. You were talking about making rock piles, and that's one of my techniques for rebuilding a calendar. Since then, I've developed what I call the emergency recalendar sun star clock. It's a plaque that is actually printed, and it's a sun calendar, it's a star calendar, and it's a way to rebuild the calendar if you lose time in the calendar. But also on it, I give sufficient information on all the orbital characteristics of Earth and our precession and everything, so that you could literally rebuild our calendar as of the year 2012, with all the characteristics of the stars in the heavens, so that if 10,000 years from now somebody comes back and digs up our civilization and finds one of these things, they could literally put a date on our calendar of 2012 and know exactly what our orbit is, what the period of the day is, everything, which we don't have in terms of archaeology.
Yeah, I think it's funny to see that the calendar that is ruling our lives, most of the people on the planet right now, is a calendar that is not based on the movements of the stars, or it's not based on the movements of the sun, it's not based on the movements of the moon, It's based basically on the speculations of the popes in the Vatican, who decided one after the other, one Julius and then Gregorian afterwards, to change it and to put the name of their own names to the calendars and to change, make the changes of dates and of the months of the days according to nothing. I mean, they're not according to the planet, they're not according to the sun, they're not according to the moon, they're not according to the seasons, nothing. Basically, it's just a totally invention. And that invention is the one that's ruling our timing and the synchronicity that we have now everywhere. I mean, you use the same calendar that the Chinese and the Egyptians and the Mayans and the Incas were you all using the same calendar that Jose Arguelles used to call, a Maya, but in the sense of illusion. It's not a Maya in the sense of the Mayan culture, but it's a concept of time that is totally an illusion.
Exactly. I'm glad you brought that up because there were 10 months before the Caesars. And they introduced July and August after Julius and Augustus Caesar and put the 31 days in each one because they wanted a month with the most days.
Yeah.
That's our calendar. That's why we have 12 months. It used to have 10. But anyway, yeah, you're right. It's funny. But this is what our modern calendar is, and then they standardize it. We still call it the Julian calendar.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, it's not connected to the natural cycles of Earth.
Nothing. No, the cosmic or the
nothing.
natural. Nothing. It's like when the French Revolution, they changed also the calendars and they made it according to totally different count of the days, on the dates, on of everything. In a month, they changed name and everything. And I mean, it's interesting that.
Let's pick it up with Jose Arguelles after the break. He was a very good friend of Alberto's. That'd be a good place to start up. Okay, folks. So back with I'm Nature in a few minutes. And Alberto, if you can go in the chat box, that would be awesome.
Okay.
Back soon, folks. Welcome back to I'm Nature. I'm your host, Brian Porter. I have Alberto Ruz and James McCanney with me discussing Mayan calendars and you name it. It's been a fascinating discussion. We sort of touched on Jose Arguelles. What can you tell the listener about Jose Arguelles, Alberto?
Yeah, well, Jose Arguelles was Mexican American. He was father Mexican, U.S. Mother, and he lived his childhood in Mexico. And then he went back to the States, and he became a teacher in arts in different universities in California and different places. So his master was basically in art, but then he started to study the Mayans. Started to study the Mayan culture, and then he had different insights traveling in Mexico back when he was already grown up. And then at a certain moment, he also started to study Delikovsky and many of the people who had theories of different theories that the scientists, just like James did, And at a certain moment, he wrote this book, which is Earth Ascending, which I think is one of his major books.
Can you say that again? Earth what?
Ascending.
Ascending, okay.
Earth Ascending, which was basically a view of how the history of humanity have gone through through millennium, And I found out that book really revealing and that mind-blowing, really mind-changing book. And then at a certain moment, he went to Palenque, and he went to the Temple of the Inscriptions, the temple where my father worked, and he went down into the, hidden chamber in the bottom of the pyramid, and then he had this encounter with Pacal, with this character who was buried right there, and then from there he developed a whole new aspect of his learning and of his teaching and of his theories, in which he decided that he was one of the people who started the harmonic convergence. It basically was his call who got the world to activate itself in 1987 with the harmonic convergence. He worked on the Day of the Earth. He was also the people who launched the Earth of the Day. And he studied very much and gave a different interpretation of the calendars. In fact, he made his own calendar, that he called a synchronization map, and the dream spell was another of his discoveries. And then he made a new interpretation of the calendar and a new interpretation of the history of humanity. And I got fascinated very much by his work. So he lived here in my community, in my house for a while. And then after, he had a very important theory, very revolutionary idea, that this calendar, Gregorian or Julian calendar, the rules our life, was basically an invention from the Vatican to to give them an excuse to make the imperialism of the church and of the imperialism of the economic occidental system all over the world, because basically they made time to become money. Time is money. And basically what his proposal was to return to the concept of time as art. And I said, that's something I go with that. So until he died a few years ago, we basically did a lot of things together. We were in same events in different parts of the world. And his movement, the movement of the change of calendar, to return to what was called first the Mayan calendar and then the galactic calendar, was created a whole international planetary movement for peace. And I'm very close to, and I understood very well that the meaning and the purpose behind it, and I support it very much.
Wow.
That's really interesting. I'm glad that you mentioned, Alberto, I'm glad you mentioned Velikovsky, because I was holding that out in my discussions. But this is really interesting for me. But I liked what you said about the Vatican invasion with the Julian calendar. And, throughout history, as the Catholic Church encompassed other civilizations, they took what they called the pagan holidays and converted them into Christian holidays. And that was one way to very subtly win these people over to supporting the international Vatican control.
Right.
And so I assume that's what Jose Arguelles is talking about when you say that.
Yeah, not only the holidays, but every place that you find now a Christian, a Catholic church, underneath is the temple. So they were also using exactly the sites that were created hundreds or thousands of years before, according to certain relationship between the architects of Mayan or Aztecs or Toltecs or Inca astronomers, and they put in top of them, they use the same stones to make their churches and their cathedrals.
Exactly. If you look at the big temples in Mexico City, for example, they were built out of they cut the stones from some of the big temples there, of which there were many in Mexico City in the old capital, and they built the temples out of that same stone.
Exactly.
Wow. Well, so maybe we could move on to another topic now, guys, because we've really, this is a fascinating topic, but
yeah,
we'll need a few shows to get through all that stuff, because I like James's theory. I certainly don't have your knowledge, Alberto, of the Mayan cultures and all the different calendars, and being best friends with Jose Arguelles. Maybe we should advise James to read his book, Earth Ascending.
Yes.
Yes, you should.
Yeah, absolutely. It's on my list here.
Yeah, it might complement your research. I'm glad you met. I really I didn't know Alberto knew so much about archaeology. I'm really impressed, Alberto.
Well, the second book that I would recommend James you to read is the Mayan Factor, because I think Earth Ascending was the first step in order to understand later why he came out with the Mayan Factor, because the Mayan Factor is the one who launched this whole campaign for the Earth Day, and the campaign for the harmonization, planetary harmonizations, for the change, for the movement of art, for planetary, for calendar change. Arguelles went all the way to the Vatican and tried to get the Pope to to change the calendar back to the Galactic Mayan calendar. He did it. He has people all over. Arguelles has people following him in Russia and South Africa, in Japan, in China, and Brazil. And when he died 3 or 4 years ago, the equivalent to the NASA in Russia gave one of the stars, the new stars, the name of Jose Arguelles.
Wow. Very interesting. Yeah, I'm surprised I have not really been immersed in this myself, but It just shows how diverse a world we live in today. There's so much information.
Yeah, no, it's he wrote quite a number of books. How many books did Jose write in total?
I think I have read around 8 or 10.
Yeah.
Ah.
I mean,
But I will start with
really,
these two.
he committed his life to trying to understand the Mayan calendars.
Right.
He really did.
He did.
And I love his interpretation because if we come from a creator, we are here to create. And art is one of the greatest ways of creating. And this is, I completely agree with his interpretation. And that,
well, Brian and Alberto, when I do my science work or I'm working on prime numbers, I feel that I'm discovering a form of art. And so, you know, it's like a composer of music or something. That's what I feel my talents are. And so I'm, in a sense, composing, but I have that creativity fire inside of me. But
yeah, I mean, you're connected to like I say, the Father, and I think, and that's a big part of the planet and all the forces here. And I think Jose and Alberto are more, and myself, although I'm kind of in between the two of you, I'm more connected to the. We're more connected to the Mother, and her more gentle energies.
No, wait. Jose Arguelles was totally connected only to the sky, to the Father. You know,
he was only Father. Yeah.
Yeah, basically. I mean, I'm more connected to the earth. But I mean, most of the times when I was reading the books of Jose Arguelles, especially Earth Ascending and Mayan Factor, I always thought that he was reading the history of humanity and of the Earth and of the planet and the systems and all of that from a spaceship. That his view on humanity, on the history of humanity, was not from up down here, it was from up there. And that was my big complementary relationship with Jose, is that I've always been very grounded, and he was all the time very much up there.
Beautiful. Well, that's, I mean, maybe he came from another planet. Who knows? Who knows? We have many mysteries to resolve here. And James actually has a way of traveling. And maybe you could just get into that a bit, James, is how he can travel without any engines between planets.
Yeah, it's a system I discovered. I actually presented one of these systems to the Air Force back in the early 1980s. I was in Los Angeles. I actually was getting funding from venture capital groups for one of the designs. They're electromagnetic propulsion systems, and basically the one I talk about in public is the one I released to the Air Force. One of my stipulations was that it would not be used for warfare, and the first thing they did was push me out of my own project and steal it for black ops use. But basically, you force large amounts of electrical current through glass tubes that pushes against a magnetic field, the naturally occurring magnetic field, and it's a form of propulsion, and it's very effective. In fact, when you see UFOs, or what we consider to be UFOs, they have a glowing ring around the outside edges. Those are the glass tubes. And along with that went a fusion battery, which is the one part I didn't give them. Because I realized that I didn't really trust them. So the part that I didn't give them was the fusion battery. But there's another system. In about 1984, I gave in 2004, I gave a talk at an international conference in Las Vegas. And the topic was electric highways to the stars. And what I developed was a passive system that can be inserted into an electric current, and it causes propulsion in one direction. And it's a very interesting design. And so anyway, my point is that design I did not give to anybody. I kept that to myself. But my point in talking to you, Brian, earlier was that nature has provided us not only with the means to live on Earth, but the means to travel in outer space very easily and very naturally. this idea of the space shuttle and chemical rockets is all a bunch of baloney. It's not the way you should travel into space, and that's why they keep failing, because they're not working with nature's plan that is very much in front of us. But I've also that the people who are not with the one with the universe cannot see these things. They don't understand them. So that's why you have fleets of NASA scientists who don't understand how the universe works, and they can't keep coming up with theories. And when they have space probe data come back, none of it makes any sense. So they will put a couple more band-aids on their old theory, and they keep going. But what I realized is these people are not connected with God, with the universe, with anything. And they are working basically for the World Bank, who runs our federal government. So 99.9% of all the scientists really are working for the devil, if you want to call it that. Certainly not connected to anything human or with this earth. And so anyway, I just wanted to mention that. But I'm a believer in technology for the human side of the world. In other words, first we have to develop humanity, and all of these other technical abilities will fall into place, and they're very beautiful technologies, but not to be used, everything from the kitchen knife, butter knife, up to the nuclear bombs for warfare. That's, if you invent something today, the first thing they do is figure out how they can use it for warfare. The insanity of this planet.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you one thing, James. We don't have too much time left, but I would like to ask you, what is your perspective or your idea or your understanding of Earth like a living being? Mother Earth.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. In fact, definitely there's the Schumann resonance. We are connected electrically. Our bodies are human antennas. That's why microwaves are so bad. Other things. Back in the mid-1990s, I was working with a group of Russian scientists from Novosibirsk Central University in Russia. And they were translating my work on comets, on the electrical nature of the solar system, because they were atmospheric scientists. They were observing plasma effects in the atmosphere, the upper atmosphere, and my work was explaining this. So in the daily discussions, as they translated my work and discussed it on a daily basis, the psychologists at the university there became interested, and they started sitting in because they were conducting experiments with, basically, they had sensors on onboard fetus of babies. And they were realizing that these babies were reacting to the positions of the planets. The reason they were interested in my work is because I talked about how the electrical alignments of the planets in our solar electric field became very strong. And that was the basis of, what they were looking for was a basis for astrology. And they found it in my work. And they realized that when the baby was born, all of the senses kicked in, and that changed a tremendous amount. Many people at birth lose their connection to the planets, or at least they lose their connection, because that was their only input prior to that. And so they realized some people are very connected to the planets and the cycles of the planets because of all of this electrical activity. So we are like electrical antennas. We're connected to the Earth, to the actions of solar storms, to the retrograde motion of Mercury. All of these things are connected, and most people go through life, they eat, they use a credit card, and they go to the gas station and to work. They're so unconnected to the world that, that's modern life. Or like you say, the Vatican, to put the calendar in and distort the reality of life so that people are out there walking around totally confused. And so what the effort I see you doing, Alberto, and the eco-cities and the eco-villages and the et cetera, what I'm trying to do, bring moderator, et cetera, to get people back to the point where we realize that modern life is not the way to live. We can live with, we always make this association with schools and modern technology, and that you have to, drive a Mercedes-Benz and work until you're age 60 and then retire. And it's so insane. that is not the way we were meant to live. And so I have my own way of living. I've been totally living freedom from that system for a long time. So that's one thing I'm trying to do, is bring my education and science in the whole we need advanced knowledge, but everything that goes with it in modern society is all wrong. It's all twisted. It's using technology for the wrong reasons. And we have to spend more time socializing and being people, something that's been totally lost in modern society. Anyway, that's kind of a summary of, I guess, does that answer your question, Alberto?
Yeah, I would like to know where do you live? Or is that also a secret?
Well, I don't live in the U.S.
Do you have a place?
I have. Yeah. Yes.
Sorry.
Maybe we can talk about it off air. James has good reason to need to maintain his anonymity. I mean, he's just had too many dealings with people.
I just wanted to. My question was to know a little about, how much of what you think is important, the way we should live, you live yourself. That was basically, if you were most into the process of educating people and making people aware and making your studies to make people understand what is not true in the way that we are being educated, and the society is ruled and the economy is ruled.
Alberto, he's had a radio show for 15 years. He's been putting out the message for 15 years.
That's why, yeah. But my question was, how
actually,
does he live?
I live what I teach, actually, yes.
He lives off the grid. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, okay, we're coming near the end of the show, guys. I hope we can both, can you guys hang on for a bit after the show? We can talk a bit more?
Sure, I'd like to.
Beto, are you okay?
No, I had a call, but I got distracted 1 second. Tell me now, again.
No, I said, can you hang on for a bit after the show so we can just further discuss a few things?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah, we
Okay,
can.
great. Okay, good. I just wanted to get that in before the commercial break hits. So,
okay.
James, yeah, I mean, I've talked a lot to James. I consider us to be good friends now. And yeah, he's quite a remarkable guy. He's, like I say, like your friend Jose, he's very connected to the Father, to the powerful forces in the universe. But he has a good humanitarian part to him, which made him reject all these people who I for the life of me, I don't understand how these scientists do this stuff. How they use their knowledge to create weapons to kill everything. I mean, to me, it's so obvious to me that this is wrong. But James avoided that. And he's a good guy, in my opinion. A very good guy, like you are, Alberto.
Thank you.
Okay. So here we are. We're coming to the conclusion of I Am Nature, a great discussion of a lot of Mayan history, calendars, and whatnot. And I encourage you to come back next week. I believe we have some indigenous people. One of them is the chief of a American tribe. So thanks for joining us this week, and we'll see you again next week on I Am Nature.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you, James. And thank you, everybody there listening.
Yes, Alberto. Thank you.
It was a pleasure to talk with you.
Yeah, it's great, guys. Love you all. Hang in there.
Thank you for listening to Revolution Radio.
Enter into a world unseen on Raven Star's Witching Hour. You will encounter eclectic topics from the realm of spirit brought into our matrix of truth. With your host, the Solaris Blue Raven. Solaris will bring you an array of unique guests covering topics from ghostly spirits to amazing anomalies, covert technology, UFOs, and shadowy global events.
And that's right here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, Saturdays, midnight till 2 a.m. Eastern Time. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps.
Let the magic rise.
Hi,
this is Bo.
And this is Rocco.
And the Bo and Rocco Show is here to offer insight into legal and lawful remedies. Our goal is to remain free and help others remain free in an ever-increasing police-like state. With the help of our guests, we try to answer questions such as what went wrong and what can we do about it.
So tune into Revolution Radio at www.freedomslips.com Wednesday nights, 10 to 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to listen to the Bo and Rocco Show.
You don't need to expect us.
We're already here.
Revolution Radio.
Every Tuesday evening on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, we present our goddess spiritual warrior, Kathy Bilski.
I command. I call to the architect of the universe's divine creators and ask for permission to quantum leap the world in all life forms on all planes and dimensions, seen and unseen, connected with planet Earth, to let us go beyond our known potential into the greatest unknown golden age the universes and worlds and all planets have ever experienced.
Kathy teaches the spiritual truth so that you may create a better life and be able to make positive changes for yourself and for the planet. She helps us remember that we are not powerless, but very creative spiritual beings having an Earth experience. Time to quantum leap into the age of divine enlightenment and let Kathy provide you with the tools of knowledge you need to awaken spiritually. That's the Quantum Leap Show. Let Light Unite every Tuesday at 10 p.m. Eastern on Revolution Radio Studio B.